Okay. Hi, I'm Nikki Hansen and I'm a landscaper, and we are here at the Drought-Tolerant Native Plant Garden at the Woodland Library in Los Altos, and we're working with GreenTown Los Altos to do this demonstration garden with the hopes that then the local population will have a very local version of what grows well in this general location. So we've already done a lot of work at this garden, and it's been a many year-long process, but right now is a really great time to plant plants. And I want to just talk about a little bit of what gardeners can be doing in their own gardens this time of year. It's December 1st, so right at the beginning of the winter season, and we have gotten just the first few rains, so the ground is actually damp now, because digging in hard clay soil, as a lot of you might know, is really hard. So right now it's perfect. So so we have a lot of diversity here. We're gonna add in a little bit more of a few things, including this ceanothus. This is a variety that has sort of a draping form. We have one or two of them already that we gave a test of last year, and they're doing great. So we're now going to add in a couple more. When I am planting and designing gardens, I always like to plant in multiples, and a sort of easy trick is planting in odd numbers tends to look more natural. So we have two of these manzanitas already. Ceanothus, but we're going to add in a third, and that kind of finishes that off a little bit. Another couple plants we're going to test out, and so because we haven't tried these out, we're going to start conservatively with just one of each, and with any luck they'll do well, and they'll add to our information about what options there are for people to plant in this area. This is Carpinteria. It's a native California bush anemone, and it has big white flowers, and if you can get it to grow, it's really pretty because it's actually an evergreen shrub, and then it gets these large white flowers, almost like a camellia, but not as ruffled. So it's a really pretty one. It's needing good drainage. So if you're in an environment with a lot of clay soil and you have clay soil, that means you don't have very good drainage. But you can do things so that you can grow even in that kind of yard. You'll notice this garden is actually a big mound, and that really helps with drainage. So even if the soil itself is kind of heavy in clay, the fact that it's on a slope means the water has somewhere to run off to, and the plants won't be sitting in a pool that stays damp for too long. The other thing we did in this garden, we mixed in a lot of compost, and that is really helpful for breaking up the clay. And then we also topped it with wood chip mulch, which helps hold in the water, and it helps keep the soil cool and the plant roots cool in the heat of summer, which is really helpful. So anyway, long story short, we are generally in a clay environment, but due to all of the things we just described, I think this Carpinteria has a good chance of growing. And then this is a really handy plant I like to use as a shrub for screening. It's Myrica californica, or California wax myrtle. It grows native on the coasts, kind of towards, like if you're driving along Highway 1 through Pescadero and Half Moon Bay, you might not know it, but there's some big, beautiful, mounding, glossy, sort of small trees, large shrubs, and those are the California wax myrtle, which is a wonderful plant for bird habitat. It's evergreen. It has good structure for bird nesting, and then in the fall it gets these little waxy berries, which to us would be really inedible, but to birds they're delicious. So I love it, and if it's happy, it grows fast. It's evergreen. You can prune it super easily. And I've had really good luck with this in areas with clay soil. So We're gonna give this a shot. It likes a little bit of protection, so I'm gonna put it on the back side, the north side of this low wall up here. Sometimes just having a little bit of shade, even if it's the bottom half of a plant, is gonna be just enough so that a plant which is used to more coastal environments will just cut down on the heat just that amount. So yeah, planting is all about kind of strategically finding the right little nook in your particular yard. So that's going to be different. Like I said, like the climate on this side of the wall, the south side of that little wall is totally different than the microclimate on the north side. So I'll have different species depending which side of the wall I'm planting. The other plant we are going to talk about but not put into this garden are these really beautiful penstemons. I think this one might have a label. Okay, well these are, you can see this penstemon cross, in this case it says Mexicali. That cross signifies it's a hybrid, and we do in California, we have a lot of native penstemons, which are really beautiful. These are hybrids. So my vision on this particular garden is we are trying to just stick with pure natives. So we're not going to use these hybrids, but I wanted to talk about them because they do have a purpose in sort of a residential garden. I make use of this kind of hybrid penstemon. I think this is a Gloxinoides for a hybrid, and it's an evergreen. It forms kind of a large, bushy perennial. It blooms a really long season, and the thing I like about it is that the native pollinators actually use it. So we have a lot of native bumblebees, and they really love this. And even though it's a hybrid, it's kind of checking a lot of boxes. It's pretty, it's drought tolerant, it's tolerant of a mixture of clay soils, and it's really showy, so it's great for a garden. And then the other thing is, when I'm using a hybrid species, I always take into consideration what the surrounding habitat is like. So in this case, I am going to take these two penstemons over to a nearby garden for a different project I'm working on in a residential neighborhood in Los Altos. And I am planting them because I'm not worried that we're going to be cross-pollinating with some native population of penstemons. So we're not going to be harming anything to a wild native California population of penstemons. Whereas if I was, say, planting a garden at Mount Umunum, which has our native California penstemon, I would probably just want to stick with our native California penstemon. That's the foothill penstemon up there. But yeah, down here I'm not worried about that particular issue. Yeah, and then one other thing to talk about is all gardens, including native gardens, need maintenance. So in order for your garden to look like a garden versus just a wild landscape, you're always going to have to do some amount of maintenance. So weeding, of course, some irrigation. It's a lot less irrigation, but if you want your native garden to look gardeny, having periodic deep soaks during the dry months is really useful. And then the other thing is we do a lot of pruning. So every fall, in this case, I already have done a lot of the pruning on this garden. We cut back the grasses. I'll show you a plant that I like because it's so easy to grow. It definitely needs pruning. So this is our native salt brush, or it's also called quail brush, and it grows down near the baylands. And you might think a plant that's growing near the baylands would need salty soils or salty water, but in this case, it doesn't need that. It is tolerant of that, and it has adaptations that can allow for it to grow in spite of really salty soils, but it doesn't need the salty soils. So in our case, I'm using this plant, which is really, really tolerant of crappy soil. So you don't even necessarily need any compost amendment. It's going to handle clay. It really can deal with that. And it's super drought tolerant. The only thing is it's more of a structural plant. It doesn't get big showy flowers, but it has like a nice silvery foliage, and it kind of fills space strategically. And around it, then you could put your showy stuff. And I want to just show you, because I get asked this question a lot when I'm putting things in a new garden. People will often come over and see what I'm doing, and they're like, those plants don't look very pretty. That's not very gardeny. And I say, no, you know what? They're baby plants right now, and in a container, they're not even going to look their best. So these are, you can see the name. In this case, they call it quail bush. So it's the same plant that's behind me. It's this nice, bushy, silvery, lush-looking thing. This is how it starts out. In this case, I'm getting it from a native plant nursery that grows for restoration projects. And they use these tube pots because it gives nice deep roots. So they look a little funny and not like the kind of pot and plant you might pick out at a local nursery, but they actually turn into this, and within 1 or 2 years, this little twiggy thing is gonna put its roots out and start really filling out. And then in order to get a nice bushy shape, I heavily prune this back once a year. So in the fall, I took probably 3 feet of foliage off of it on all sides. But it's only a once a year thing, and then it's good. So I really appreciate these like tough, resilient, evergreen plants that kind of keep that structure in the garden looking nice. And yeah, that's about all. And thanks for being interested in native plants.